Hey, I'm Alexander Wolf. This podcast video is not going to be exactly focused on business. I thought it'd be a good opportunity right now to talk about the forest fires, and we have Aide, who is a biologist in Northern Ontario. Aide, what exactly does a biologist do?
Biologists can range from many different kinds of professions. They can do consulting, they can do research, they can teach, they can work for the government, they can open their own businesses.
Like activities though, well, first of all, we should introduce you. You're Aide.
Everybody.
You're my blood sister, like a real sister, normal sister.
I guess so, right?
Yeah, like we share the same mom. That makes it even more weird. We're just normal siblings.
She's my
older sister.
I'm his older sister. And I am a biologist by education and by trade. So I do practice what I went to school for. I specialized in biodiversity. I went to McMaster University, and I also have a lot of working experience, over 6 years in the field.
Doing exactly what?
I do various wildlife and fish assessments and I manage the resources of Northern Ontario. Meaning, so we have fisheries resources where people would like to continue to have fishing opportunities, viewing, etc. I make sure that those resources are there for future generations. Meanwhile, we also provide economic opportunities such as the forestry industry, etc. So it's all taking a landscape view at an ecosystem and being able to maintain the social, economic, and environmental opportunities while trying to balance all those three tiers in the system.
So we can say that you are very much qualified to understand ecosystems and nature?
Well, I mean, nobody can really understand nature. That's why it's so beautiful. But I have an understanding of ecosystems, how they work, as much as we can, right?
Okay.
There's always so much that we cannot know, and hence why it's so wonderful to be in this position. I'm able to always be surprised and learn new things.
All right, so what can we, not bury the lead, what can you tell us about forest fires? As in, what causes them? Maybe, are they good? What do they do? Like, what is the function of forest fires? Because they exist in nature naturally, so what are the functions of them?
Right, so forest fires are a very natural phenomena. It occurs due to, most likely, thunderstorms, right? Where you have lightning hitting a tree, sometimes animals, and then based on the weather conditions, localized weather conditions, so your duff layer, meaning the bottom of the forest, if it's very dry and the conditions are conducive to beginning a forest fire, then it will happen, right? Especially in Northern Ontario, where I have most of my understanding from, you have your fuel types, different types of fuel types and terrain, right? There's three key elements for a fire or for a forest fire. You have your fuel types, which is your trees, you have your conifers, which are evergreens. They don't lose their needles in the winter, and they have very much so serratinous cones, meaning that they need fire to open up, right? So it's a very natural process.
So they need fire?
Yes, absolutely. So the boreal forest, which is one of the biggest forests in the world, right, it has evolved with forest fires. But let's go back to that triangle. So you have your fuel types, right? Then you have your weather, right? So you need ignition from lightning, and that is caused by your low and high pressure systems coming in. Imagine, so people think of weather as a very localized engine. So when you look up and you see clouds and you're like, oh yeah, it's going to be a cloudy day or a sunny day. We are looking at weather at a 50,000 feet above the ground. That's the weather that matters. That's the weather that causes and has an effect on your more localized weather. The way that you can think about weather is with your low pressures and your high pressure systems is have you ever, your normal general geography class where you have your convergent and divergent tectonic plates? So you have a convergent tectonic plates, you have your oceanic plate going under your, shoot, I forgot now the name of it. You have the convergent plates coming in, and what causes earthquakes, for example, right? Or volcanoes. Friction. Now this is your low pressure system coming in with your high pressure system. And they're always constantly fighting. Eventually the friction is so much that they break. And when that energy is released, that's when you have your weather. Your weather occurs at that level. And that's when you have your thunderstorms or you have your lightning, and that causes the fire. And the third is terrain. A fire will spread through a landscape very differently if has lots of hills or if it's just flat and it can run rampant, right? So when you look at those three components, that's predominantly what manifests and creates a forest fire, and the conditions of whether it's going to be a very intense forest fire, a small forest fire, etc. Now, forest fires, of course, nowadays we don't let them run rampant, right? We manage forest fires now. We try to not let them do what they were naturally, the ecosystem evolved naturally to have that cyclical effect of forest fires on these ecosystems, right?
Is there like a schedule, or like every few years that forest fires are supposed to happen?
So forest fires, if you were to take away human impact from the landscape and run models that simulate the frequency of the cycles of forest fires, because they have a cycle, and we pretty much can picture this with the model, right? Predict them with the model. We see that without human intervention, there will be big forest fires that burn a lot of the forest, smaller ones, and you can see them. The sizes and intensity of the forest fires varies throughout time. Mm-hmm. Now, the conflict for us to manage such a large landscape level phenomena is that we now consider what it's being burnt a resource, right? We don't want the pines, you don't want those trees to be burnt because you're cutting them for fuel and for wood, right? So we stop forest fires to protect the values found there. The cottages, the eagle's nests, all of those are values that we take into account, and that's why we no longer let the forest fires run rampant, because we have to protect those values that we use later on.
Let's refocus, because I want to talk about the Amazon fires, right? Because right now it's huge on Instagram and all social media, and for me, once movements like that start going on and you see everybody posting about them, I see it a lot like propaganda, right? Who's gaining from all these ads? I'm not saying I don't care about the Amazon, but somebody's creating all these ads for a reason, right? So I just look at all those ads and everybody posting about it. I'm like, okay, that's going on. What's really going on? What's the real reason? Obviously, do you know anything about the Amazon fires?
Yes, I have informed myself through social media, right?
Okay.
So the news. I would agree with you. It's news in these days, so let's just put a little tangent on my perspective on news. News, unfortunately, I've seen it throughout time, they've had to become a bit more exaggerated in the way that they
centralize whatever they're doing, so it's filled with emotion.
Exactly, to capture the audience, because we have information so readily available to us now. We have podcasts with very informed people that have a lot of knowledge, right, on this particular subject and many more. We have Instagram. Information is readily available for us at a click of a button, or hey Siri, So I feel as though, and I think from what I've seen in the trends, the news have become a bit more exaggerated, and they have used more techniques to capture the audience, trying to focus on maybe what's not really should be focused, right? Not to say that news are all lies. they're just changed their focus. Perhaps.
It's a business.
Exactly.
It's a
Follow
business
the money.
that they want to get more money. They want to get more views.
Yes.
And I'm a little hesitant on believing nonprofit organizations like charities. That's just my personal view. Just keep some facts. Let's go through some facts. Once a forest fire starts, is there anything we can do as human beings to stop it?
Depends on the fire, right? Depends on the fuel type, depends on the topography, depends on the weather. If you have, right now, Ontario is at a drought state. Fires will pop and will burn very quickly. If you have the right winds, the right ignition type, and the right dryness, so there's no humidity, right? Your relative humidity is pretty low right now. We haven't had rain in a very long time. Those indices are indicative of maybe we're gonna have a late forest fire season in Ontario. Now, at the scale at which we are observing these forest fires in the Amazon, we are talking about like a lot of area.
Mm-hmm.
What are their resources? First of all, does the country have the resources to go and fight these fires? Do they want to fight these fires? Is this something that you would like, the country sees as, do they have the budget, or is it within their budget to go and spend
probably millions and millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars to save the forest? I understand that there are perhaps a lot of individuals that are concerned with the carbon that may be released and what that means for climate change in such a large scale. Nevertheless, if you're concerned about a forest fire, which is a natural event, this ecosystem has evolved to have cyclical forest fires. Some plants, such as jack pine, for example, to bring it down to a more localized environment, needs fire to open up its cones. Without it, it doesn't. So plants have evolved to have these events throughout their lifetime. Forest fires also, they break down all of the nutrients and it goes down. Now, of course, depending on the intensity, some forest fires can burn down to the mineral soil, and then that's when you have your loss of soil. Yes, that's also a thing. I am aware of that. But the thing is that if you're concerned about losing the Amazon, then be concerned about losing it due to agriculture, not because of a forest fire. A forest fire is more of a natural event than agriculture. Agriculture, you have clearance of a natural, unprecedented clearance of the forest to put in monocultures in place.
What's a monoculture?
A monoculture is a single species plantation.
So basically...
just corn just soybeans,
mm-hmm.
which is not good because you deplete, corn is a C3 species that really depletes your soil nutrition, right? Hence, there's lots of studies done that show that crop rotation is better, because then you're able to put in your beans, your legumes, which absorb nitrogen and deposit it back into your soil and provide that to other plants. And then if you rotate it with something that's very ferociously absorbing those nutrients from the soil, such as corn, then at least you're going to have the next growing season, you're going to have something that's going to put nutrients back into your soil. So soil is a very important aspect of this. So in my personal and professional discretion, I feel as though it becomes a bit too much of a panic when these things happen, because you just mentioned keywords, right? Oh, climate change. Oh, carbon sequestration. Oh, the Amazon is one of the biggest
rainforests. Lung of the world.
You're like, okay, yeah, but there has been, the Amazon has been under threat from various types of things throughout existence, right? And it just becomes like the one thing that you focus on.
Yeah.
This is the one thing to focus on right now. But they've been clearing it for agriculture and monocultures for over 10 years. They've been exploiting and killing species. There has been all of that still there. It's just I find it that news becomes cyclical. They need something interesting to bring awareness. It becomes like a thing, and then it dies down, and then people forget about it. And then the next thing, and then people forget about it.
Let's state the fires obviously have some effect of what we've done to the environment, right? Or the people by the Amazon, like clearing helps with the fires, right? What are the human effects on causing forest fires?
Right, so as anthropogenic effects on the landscape are evident, if you are going to be changing an ecosystem, if you're going to be changing the ecosystem and its cycles, meaning it no longer has the trees that provide the shade, that create a little microclimate, and it has the relative it's a rainforest. The relative humidity in the rainforest should be 100%, because at 100% relative humidity, it rains. So if you clear those big trees, you're exposing all these plants and the soil type that are used to being extremely concentrated with water to the sun, to the wind, to all of those erosion agents, right, that are very, very good at doing what they do. Wind and the sun, they will, if a soil is left exposed, you will get rid of all the good top layers of the soil and get down to the mineral soil very quickly. So anthropogenic effects in the rainforest, such as clearing it for agriculture, of course. Is there a direct correlation? Has a study been done at a large scale to say that there are a direct correlation between clearing the land and the frequency of the forest fire? I'm not aware of any study that has done it at that large scale. Mm-hmm. But you are changing the fundamental ecosystem. So there are going to be effects, cause and effect.
And my point of view, we shouldn't really judge or look down upon these clearings and agriculture, because we gotta think, if we use Brazil as an example, Brazil for a very long time, probably over 30 years, their main fuel source for cars and machines is ethanol from sugarcane.
Of course.
Brazil is one of the richest South American countries, if not the richest, because of that, because they plant a lot of sugarcane to create ethanol for fuel. Before that, I'm not an expert, but before that, they were very reliant on the US and the oil, which their economy was really bad. But once they started to create their own fuel source from ethanol and from the sugarcane, which meant clearing those for the forest and the Amazon for that rich soil so they could grow the sugarcane. I mean, you come down to what's worse, having really poor people dying, starving with gangs, or having a little bit of economic prosperity because they cleared the Amazon for them to be able to have jobs and wealth. It's not like these are bad, this is good, white and black. It's really complicated issues.
They are. I agree. That's where that balance between your social, your economic, and your ecological, it's so important, and nobody has it down. If we had it down, we wouldn't be having these discussions.
Does Canada have it down?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we are better off because we're a first world country. Nevertheless, that's not due to, it's mostly due to chance because of where we are located, right? You go back to, we are in the Northern Hemisphere, we have a lot of resources, just like they did, but based on our evolution of social evolution, right? We were able to meet Maslow's triangle way faster, right? Where you need your food, your home, to create that prosperity. It's very easy for myself included to forget that I am very, very lucky to live in a world that provides, well, in a country that's a first world country. I don't suffer from or lack many things. I don't have to worry about running water or drinking water, or I don't have to worry about being warm. I have there are or food nevertheless, right? We cannot judge third world countries because they're just trying to meet the basic triangle, right? They're just trying to provide for their families. They're just trying to do what it takes to at least have the basic needs to be happy. So it's very easy for us to look and be like, oh, they're clearing the forest, they're doing this, they're doing that. Well, that's the way that they're able to provide for their families. I would do the same. If it came down and they asked me, clear the forest or your family goes hungry, I would clear the forest. It's a natural inclination for self-preservation. We as Homo sapiens sapiens have, in every other animal, amphibian, reptile, insect, self-preservation is our number one driven natural.
We should add too, though. Yes, there is corruption there, and especially in a third world country. Yes, there are rules and about not clearing the Amazon or whatever you want to say, and there is corruption where they let them because they know somebody in the government. They let them cut down whatever acres, but that happens everywhere.
Yes.
Even Canada.
And a lot of Canadians, I would say, that I have known, I'm not saying general populace, I'm just speaking from personal experience, believe that that's not the case. But it's a mirage that's not true. There is corruption everywhere. Now, the degree of, because we're so well off, we don't see it. Like the level of corruption is so high up that once it trickles down to us, it's not as visible as I'm going to pay you under the table so I can cut the forest, or you cannot conserve the forest. Mm-hmm. It's very naive for individuals that have the ability, meaning have an iPhone and get their news about the Amazon and freak out and I want to donate $10 and they feel like they've done something. Okay, great, you've done something, but it has to start with you. If you really want to do and better the world, you have to start with yourself. What can you do to help? Because when you start talking about trying to figure out whether a country-wise decision is right and how to manage a country, one of my favorite thinkers of this world, Jordan Peterson, says, well, if you can't control your home, how can you think to control a country? If you can remain and introduce order into your own life, get up, make your bed, work out, like how hard is it for you to just go and work out? Now you're trying to tell me that you're going to have the answers to figure out how to run a country and how to run inter-country relationships? Like, it's absurd for us to even be...
It's absurd to think just one person could do it, because it's every little thing you do affects another thing.
Of course.
So you have to... It's just impossible. It's very difficult.
It is very difficult, and not accepting the degree and not speaking about how difficult it is about running a country and then running the relationships between countries and how those countries are pretty much their own organism in a way. How we do that and how we go about discussing these things. We must put it out in the air. It's a very complicated multi-organism. We're talking about billions and billions of people in the world that have their own agenda, and now you put them together and they may have their personal agenda, but they may belong to a group that has a group agenda, and then that group belongs to a bigger group, and then a country has its own agenda.
Okay, I'm confused already. Let's move on. Jesus.
All I'm saying is that discussing these kinds of large landscape events, we shouldn't forget the scale at which we are talking about and the scale of change that we can inflict in those events. Me donating $10 to the Amazon forest fires is going to do nothing.
Well, that's depressing.
No, it's not. It's being able to recognize your limitations.
Okay. Why don't you tell us more about northern, because you're more familiar with the northern Ontario ecosystem.
Right, we're the boreal forest.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more. I'm ignorant. I don't know anything. So teach me about like the northern Ontario ecosystem.
You're not ignorant, you're just not knowledgeable. Ignorant is knowing something and still proceeding to do that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So what's the boreal forest? What do you want me to run you down? The boreal forest has a very intimate relationship with forest fires. It has evolved to incorporate those forest fires into its rhythm and cycle. Nevertheless, in the most recent years, the government, industry, and all of those components have agreed that because we now value those trees as a resource for economic development and sovereignty, we now protect that, which means that we have Ontario Forest Fire Rangers protecting that and trying to put the fires out. So how do you compensate for that, right? You have a very important key element of the ecosystem that no longer is present. How are you able to provide that type of input into the ecosystem without the fire being there? And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create those types of sporadic, different large kind of burns and mimic what a forest would do through the harvesting of the wood. So let's say a forest fire would come in, here's a lake, here's your forest, and a forest fire would come in and burn all the way up to the lake edge, and it wouldn't jump, but it will kind of go to the left. Well, knowing that through modeling, what they're trying to do is they're trying to work with the forest company to cut the patch size that the forest fire would burn and the pattern of which the forest fire would burn. That way you would have the same type or as close as possible pattern and size.
So they're replacing the fire that would clear,
right,
and they would clear cut that area.
Yes.
Okay.
So at least to try and mimic what the forest fire would.
What are the downsides
cut
to that?
Well, some may say that we are still trying to. We're trying to replace a natural process by an anthropogenic process. So we're trying to do something that nature has mastered for many millions of years, for something that we think is going to work.
So we're just doing this without actually really knowing what are the consequences.
Well, there are some models. There are some science and research behind that shows that this is the best way of doing it in comparison to what we were doing before, which was just clear cut everything. Not too long ago, they used to just clear cut the boreal forest and not even replant trees. Now there are policies and guidelines in place where you have to, if you do clear cut the area, you do have to come back and replant the trees that were there before, right? So we are improving. I mean, this is all a learning as you go, right? But that's kind of what what's happening in the boreal forest, kind of what we're doing. So the boreal forest is beautiful forest. I really enjoy it. It has many wonderful wetlands. I mean, that's another huge feature of the boreal forest. The wetland features, especially particular because of the beaver, right? We know that the beavers are a keystone species, meaning that they build their own ecosystem themselves. They build their own little habitat niche by creating their dams, and that the dams creates a water logging and water backup, creating wetlands. So it's awesome.
So beavers create wetlands?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they do. They're amazing. They also, destroy roads. Because if a beaver dam goes and there's a road right there, it will wash it out. So